I want to make sure we have the time we need for questions at the end. So I'm going to get going. So thanks for meeting with us, everybody. Thanks for joining this call. This BTS Summit 2022 meeting is on tips and tricks for Microsoft Azure AD. We're excited to present to the audience. So Jonah, go ahead and switch slides for me. Okay, so I'm going to go over a couple of housekeeping items. I'll present the first 5 or 6 slides and then pass it over to Eric and Jonah and his team. So this is being recorded. You should have got notification of that. We always want to make sure that you guys know that this is being recorded, so you can share it after, you can watch it after. Everyone's muted. So we want this to be as interactive as possible. So if you guys have questions, please put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring those, making sure that we cover them at the end of the session. And then we'll respond to them as the meeting goes. But if you're having any connection problems, let me know directly, or you can contact our event supporter at support@journeyteam.com. There is a short survey at the end of this. We want to make sure that you guys get that filled out before you leave. I will be putting the link in the chat with about 10 minutes left, so you guys have that, and you can do that as questions go through. But that gives you an entry into a drawing for an Amazon gift card, and then you'll be put in a big additional drawing for a Sapphire Surface Pro 9. So make sure you get that filled out. Okay, a little bit about JourneyTEAM. We have some clients on here. We might have some new people. So let me give you kind of a 10,000 foot overview of JourneyTEAM, who we are and what we represent. And we've got about 100, and I think we have closer to about 150 team members now. We're mostly located in Salt Lake City, Utah, but we're spread out. We've got an office in Nashville, Tennessee. We've got some in the South, and then we've got a couple associates on the West Coast. So we've got about 350 plus active customers in the past 12 months. Been around for about 30 years. I love this number. I love showing it. Our referenceable customers are at 90%. This is a really good number that we stand by. We love creating new projects, doing projects, and most importantly, having a satisfied customer at the end. So 1,300 plus projects completed in the last 5 years to date. So. Okay, this is going to go over some of our awards and accolades. Our relationship with Microsoft is it's very important to us. We keep a very tight relationship with them. We are part of their 2021-2022 Inner Circle, which means we're in the top 1% of the business that we do with Microsoft. We've been their Partner of the Year in 2019 and 2020. Been a top workplaces. Just some of our accolades as we go through this. Go ahead, Jonah. Okay, a little bit about what we do. So at our core, we are a Microsoft shop. We have teams segregated into different pieces that you'll see at the top of the screen here. So we've got a full ERP team, a CRM team, a full cloud team that we're going to be talking with today. Eric Roth is the director of our cloud team. We also have a SharePoint team that does collaboration and content, and then a data and BI team as well. So one of the things that really sets us apart is all of our teams work together. We all work together to get a project complete. A lot of times our cloud team will come in on CRM and ERP implementations because they need that help. And what's nice is we can go across the aisle here and get that help internally. Okay, I'm gonna kick it over to the presenters. Again, I want to remind everyone, any questions, this is an open forum, put them in the chat. We'll make sure that we address those as we go through this, but I'm going to kick it off to the presenters and let them introduce themselves.
Thank you, John. Appreciate the intro. My name's Eric, and I've been with JourneyTEAM just over 7 years now. And I started the cloud practice when I joined us, and thrilled to be with you guys. Done BTS several years, and excited to share what is I'm near and dear and passionate about with Azure Active Directory. So that's me, Jonah.
Thanks, Eric. So I'm Jonah Sison. I've been with JourneyTEAM for nearly 2 years now, and I'm a cloud solution specialist on Eric's cloud team. So happy to be here and present to you guys and show you kind of some of the things that we've been running into and some new things that we want to talk about. So.
Yep. And I'll talk to Reese. I didn't know if I was going to be able to present today because of some life events that are going on in our family, but he was going to cover if not. And so he may pop in and out and just sprinkle his goodness with us, hopefully. So Reese is on our team. Jonah and Reese are both on our team, and so he's one of our resources here. So that's us.
Okay. So oh, I skipped one here. Oh, no, I didn't. Okay, so we just wanted to, like I said, go over a couple new things as well as items that we've encountered in the projects we're doing for clients, and just overall tips and tricks and notices for things involving Azure. So first thing I want to talk about is Microsoft Entra. So Microsoft Entra is Microsoft's new product family, and it encompasses all of Microsoft's identity and access capabilities. So some of these are technologies that we obviously are aware of, like Azure Active Directory, but as well as some newer technologies and things that Microsoft is rolling out, like decentralized identity. And what's cool is you can access Entra right now going to entra.microsoft.com. And so I'm just going to start there, and we're going to do some demos throughout our presentation, and we're going to do all of that out of Entra. And because Azure Active Directory is in Entra, this is going to be pretty easy. And as you can see, it's pretty similar to what we're used to here. So Entra, when there's new things coming into the decentralized identity and permissions management sphere, Entra is going to be the place to go. So let's go forward here. The first thing we wanted to talk about, just some housekeeping items, is group-based licensing. So we always recommend group-based licensing with our clients, whether we're migrating them to Azure or just doing a tenant health check. Group-based licensing takes advantage of groups in Azure Active Directory to handle user licensing. And so there's a lot of benefits to doing it this way, as opposed to individually assigning licenses. And some of them are streamlining administrative processes. And what we mean by that is that as users move throughout your company into different departments, or as you gain new employees or lose employees, managing licensing through groups is a much more efficient way to spend your time as an admin. Having to manually adjust everyone's licenses individually can take up a lot of time. This group-based licensing also helps with license efficiency. And what I mean by that is when everyone has their own licenses and there's a lot of movement in your company, sometimes people can retain licenses that were assigned if they weren't outboarded properly, or just as you're going through day-to-day moving people along, you end up having a couple licenses, or more often than not, a lot of licenses that aren't being used that you're still paying for. By using group-based licensing, we make sure that licenses are aggregated into one place and can be managed in one place and can be used more efficiently. Another important part of group-based licensing that sometimes get overlooked is consistent license assignment, especially with subcomponents and services. So I just want to show here, I have a licensing group set up in our demo tenant here. I named it the name of our license. And as you can see, if we go to the license here, we can adjust what services are used and which ones are not. So say your organization isn't ready to integrate Yammer into their workflow, we can disable this. Now, if licenses were assigned individually, we'd have to go to each user and disable or enable any services that we need to. But with group-based licensing, we can do it all in the group, and all the users in the group get assigned the specific services. So for example, I'm going to go to a member in this group. We'll just do Adele here, fake Adele, she's not real. We'll go to licenses, and we can see, first of all, that Office 365 E5 is inherited through this group. So you can see that she's assigned this license via this group. If she were to be removed from this group, this license would be removed, and vice versa. If she were to be added, it'd be added, providing that you have enough licenses in your group. But what's really cool is like what I just showed you with services. We turned off Yammer and Whiteboard, and they're off for her as well. I know it's kind of bright. I don't know if you could see, but those services are off for Adele, and that'll be true for any user in this group. So like I said, we always suggest that our clients are using group-based licensing. This is just best practice when it comes to license assignment and administrative processes. This kind of leads me into our next topic, something new that is, I don't know, is it currently in preview, Eric, or has it become mainstream at this point?
It's full general release, yeah.
Right, cool. So the next thing I was going to talk about is our new Azure AD user page experience. So one new very handy item here is our column editor. So we could edit columns before, but we were very limited at what data we could show. So say I needed to see extension attributes. That's kind of an uncommon item when it comes to this all users page. Now we can add that here. As you can see, I've added extension attributes. And if we add a column, we can see all of these properties, virtually all of the properties that users have in Azure can be sorted now in columns. So we can add mobile phone. I don't know if that was there already. And we could save and we could see that's added to the list. Another handy thing that's new is you can go right here and drag and drop to adjust your view however you'd like. So we can move that over here and wherever is most convenient for you, whatever you're focusing on. And this whole streamlined process is a lot better for when you're looking into items that are more specific rather than just the general information that you normally get. So that is one thing we like that's new. Another item here is if we drill into a user, you can see that it's a little bit different. We have a properties tab up here. And it shows us an entire list of all the properties, virtually all the properties we saw in the column editor. One thing to note here is you can also edit these items on the fly. But an important note here is that it's only available to CloudMaster users. So if you're using Azure AD Sync, or Azure AD Connect, I should say, and you're syncing from an on-prem directory, these properties can't be edited just like usual. If you want to edit them, you have to go to your Active Directory server and wait for it to sync up or force a sync. One thing here that I like that has impacted projects that I've been working on with clients recently is you can now even see extension attributes on this page, which was such a pain before, but now you can see it. One thing to note here, though, is that's interesting is that you can't actually edit extension attributes here. So I figure I kind of cut down the work that you guys have to do and show you how to actually edit these. So we actually have to go to the Exchange Admin Center, and we'll wait for things to load here. And we're going to go to mailboxes, and we're going to go into Adele, the user we were looking at, and we're going to go to others and custom attributes. So as you can see here, we can easily edit all of these, and we're just going to test to see if this works. Is this working now? Obviously a little silly here. Save it. It says it could take up to 5 minutes. In my experience, around 30 seconds, but we'll give it a second. Like I said, these properties can be edited only if it's a CloudMaster user, so make sure you're monitoring that. And let me just refresh here and see if we got our extension attributes updated. Yep, looks like it's working for us now. So like I said, remember extension attributes are edited in the Exchange Admin Center by drilling into the mailbox. It's a little thing that'll save you some time. Okay, so stepping away from users a little bit, we've been doing a lot of projects involving SSO apps, and I figure we talk about some of the tips and tricks that we've stumbled across along the way, that we spent some time figuring out and seeing what has worked best for us. So the first item I want to talk about are SAML attribute transforms. So I'm going to go back to our tenant here in Intra, go to Enterprise Applications. And we're going to use an app called IAM Showcase. It's a nice app that you can use to test SAML tokens and configurations for SSO in Azure. So when we go to the single sign-on page here, this is where we're going to handle all of our SAML configurations. So we have here identifiers and sign-on URLs, the average stuff that you have to configure to get SSO set up with the external app. But we also have attributes and claims. So attributes and claims are bits of data passed in through the SAML token that allows you to configure users in an external app with information from your tenant. One issue we ran into during a project where we were migrating the IDP for SSO from another service to Azure was that the service provider or the application developers required certain information about users. So let me go and show you that. For example, they required to know if a user had the property employee, member, or student, and the app would display specific information for them depending on that value. The problem was in this client's Azure tenant, they're they aggregated all of these values into one extension attribute. So they essentially aggregated those values into a comma delimited string. So the problem here was that the app developer couldn't read this string and provide the values. They needed a separate SAML attribute or SAML token attribute for each item. So what we did here was employed transformations. And transformations is a fancy way of saying logic. So Azure enables us to use logic in our attributes when a one-to-one attribute value doesn't work for an integration. So we set up a really simple transformation here. In this transformation field, you can see we have all these values that we could use to read attributes we have in Azure. So we're using contains here. And so in our logic here, we're saying if user extension attribute 2 contains this value, which is employee, we could see that for this user, it does, my user, then display the value employee. So that's very simple workaround to this issue. We also did that for each of these values. One thing to note here is that faculty is not a part of my specific comma delimited string because for each user it's going to be different, right? So we're going to see how that affects the SAML token. So if we go ahead and test this, again, the app we're using is called IAM Showcase and helps us to see what our SAML token looks like when we're signing in. So we're going to check that out. And as you can see, the logic in our tenant read the extension attribute 2 and displayed accordingly. So is employee, our attribute that we have logic for, displayed employee, student displayed student, and member displayed member. And what's really cool, I think, is that we also have some logic and an attribute that read is called is faculty that read the extension attribute 2, and if it said there is faculty in this comma delimited string, it'll display it. Because that value is not here, that string is not here, it doesn't display it as part of our SAML token. So transforms are really good, again, for when you your values expected in a SAML token do not quite match up one-to-one with attributes you have in Azure. And they'll definitely get you out of a pickle if you ever need it. The next thing we want to talk about is SAML certificate expirations. So I'm going to go back here to our tenant. This SAML certificates page is set up new for every app integration you create as you create it. And essentially what this section is talking about is when you set up a SAML integration, a certificate is generated. And normally, by default, SAML certificates expire after 3 years, but they're vital to maintaining that SSO connection with your app developer. So once it's expired, your SAML tokens aren't going to work anymore. So by default, when you set up an application, the admin account that's used to set up an enterprise application is used for that notification email. Azure will send you a notification email 60, 30, and 7 days before your enterprise app SAML cert is going to expire so that you can renew it and send that to your app developer. If this is just the admin account that set up the enterprise application, if he leaves or something changes to his email, this won't be updated and no one will know. And then you're going to have a day or two where you're out of luck for that application. So we suggest that this is set as a distribution list so that multiple people or a department always gets notifications and you're not caught with your pants down here. So that's something we've run into that we think is important that everyone remembers to do. One other really simple item that we don't see used very often is descriptions. Descriptions, especially in enterprise apps, can be a great way to relay information to future admins that might be dealing with an app, especially because it really depends on the app developer, certain configurations you set up in Azure. So listing those items here in this description field, in this notes field, is really handy. And you can even use, there's even description fields in things such as Azure groups and more in Azure that we really recommend using that we never really see. And filling out that information saves a lot of time when it comes to maintenance and upgrades and migrations. It really helps future admins streamline that process and saves you a lot of time. The next thing I want to talk about is configuring collections for your My Apps page. So this is another item that can be done in this enterprise applications page we've been working in. And it's really simple. If you go to your enterprise applications, you get a collections page here, and you can set up a new collection, add owners, add users and groups that will be able to view that collection in their My Apps page. And you can also add applications. An interesting thing to note here is that, let me back out of here. These don't have to be SSO apps. You can add apps to collections that aren't using SSO at all. So Box here isn't using SSO, and it'll still show up in our My Apps page. So figure I go and show the My Apps page real quick and show kind of what a collection looks like. And so we can go to apps here, and these are all the apps I have access to in this tenant. But if we go to this new app collection, which is the name of the app collection I gave it, you can see the apps that we have listed here. One other important aspect about apps that aren't SSL that we can add to this My Apps page is the types of SSO that you can employ. So let me go back here, and we're going to look at Box. So if we go to single sign-on, we can see that it's not actually SAML configured, which is what we've been looking at so far. It's password-based. So we have two other items here that are really interesting that add a lot of depth to what you can do in Azure as far as enterprise applications. And I just want to describe the difference here. So a password-based SSO essentially only uses your authentication method that the app uses. So there's no authentication method being used from Azure. However, when you sign into an app using this SSL method, a browser, the My Apps browser extension will be prompted. And if you don't have it, it'll prompt you to install. And what that will do is record your sign-in credentials to that app and store them in Azure. So when you're signing in from Azure, it'll know your credentials for that app specifically and provide that to the authentication page and sign you in automatically. So it's not using your Azure creds to do that work. It's using your sign-in method, whatever sign-in method you're using for that application, and storing that password and username in Azure for you to use for that app specifically. So that's handy. Linked, however, is literally just a link, and you can still add this to your My Apps page for people to know, okay, these are the apps I'm using for this service and whatnot, but it's not using any kind of auth details from your Azure tenant at all to sign in. It's essentially a glorified link. But this can be useful too, right, to kind of streamline where your users are going to access work-related apps. And all these can be added to the My Apps page. So we recommend, even if you're not using SAML, to use some sort of integration here in Azure, whether it's linked or password-based. And yep, we talked about that. And the next thing we want to talk about, and I'll turn the time over to Eric now, is about moving away from ADFS and our capabilities in doing so.
Yeah, so we've shown you a bunch of stuff about enterprise apps in Azure AD. Thank you, Jonah. Good stuff there. And just a quick plug here, if you're still using Active Directory Federation services, please come talk to us. There is no reason anymore to use that, and you'll get a way better experience with better functionality and more security, and no infrastructure to manage. So we can help you with that. Microsoft has some great tools to migrate apps off of ADFS and analyze them. And with the features and functionality now of Azure AD, certificate-based auth, for example, is now natively part of Azure AD. That was one of the holdouts that people were still using ADFS for. So anyway, that's the story on that one. So I'm going to jump into now and just kind of I'm going to take over screen share. The first we're going to talk about is Graph Explorer. And Jonah, keep me honest on what are the next topics, because I'll just pick up screen share here and
You got it.
we'll start walking you through some of this stuff here. Okay, we're going to talk about Graph Explorer. I used to use this tool more than I use it today because there is those additional properties that are now on the user object, and I can see most of what I would go to the Graph Explorer for. So really quick, the Graph Explorer, you can Google it. It's developer.microsoft.com. In this demo tenant, I have nuked it and I'm starting over fresh. So when you go here the first time, you're going to click your username up here in the upper right, and I'm going to sign in with my account that's going on here, and I have to grant it consent. Okay. Another
Eric,
thing.
I don't think you're sharing it.
Oh, I'm not. Well, thank you. How about that? Is that coming through?
Looks good.
Okay, I missed the click. I apologize. Thank you. So developer.microsoft.com is the Graph Explorer. This is simply a web application, a tool from Microsoft that you can use to interact with their quote Graph API. The Graph API is the mother of all APIs in the Microsoft 365 world. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of different permissions that let you see different things inside an M365 environment. Okay. So this is a critically powerful tool, and it's scary what we see in customers' tenants. And so what I'm going to show you here is super important. I'm going to give the ability for this application to read my profile and maintain data. That's very basic stuff. If you're an administrator and you see this checkbox to consent on behalf of your org, you have to know what's going to happen when you click this box or not. Okay, in my case, I'm not going to enable that for the entire tenant. I'm going to accept this. And what that's going to do is instantiate this application in my Azure AD environment. It's technically a multi-tenant app from Microsoft. And I now have the ability to read. I'm just going to go query my user object, and I get all this nifty stuff out about my account. All the licenses that are assigned, all the attributes, all the properties. If I'm synced from AD, I can see that data, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so that's Graph Explorer. If you want to see other people's information, then you can come over here to manage, you can come over here to manage the permissions that you have going on to see things here, okay? So we're going to go up here and we're going to consent to permissions. And these are all the permissions that you could potentially get, okay? So a lot of times I will go here and I will search for user, and I want to be able to read all user information. Okay, you can write to user information through the graph as well. So sure, let's do read write all. And I'm going to consent to that. This pops up. I'm getting more permissions added to this application. Once again, if I check this, basically the thing you have to know is this gives anybody in my tenant the ability to do these things, not just myself. Okay. So I'm gonna tick that, and then you'll see what this looks like on the back end. So we just granted that. So that's the Graph Explorer. It's super helpful to see additional details about a user or to set properties. Okay. Let's jump over to
Log analytics.
what's the next topic I was going to cover?
Log analytics.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. If you have an M365 tenant, you need to have this today. Okay. So what is log analytics? What I've got here is I've got in Azure, native Azure. So let me just go back a little bit here. I go to Azure, I go to my subscriptions. So we're over in the Azure ecosystem where you can spin up VMs and stuff, and you have to have a subscription. So I've got a demo subscription. Inside here, I have a log analytics workspace. Okay, to get to that, I just went to the log analytics tool here, and I created a log analytics workspace. Okay, I've got it here. I can drill into it. I can see stuff about it. Know that this is an important door, usage and estimated costs. When I go here, I can set my data retention. So any data that gets pushed into this log analytics workspace, I can retain for whatever I want, up to 730 days. Okay. Trivia question. How long do Azure AD logs get stored for you by default? I know Jonah knows the answer, right? You get a whopping 30 days of logs, of sign-in, audit logs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you want to keep that more than 30 days, which you do, you need to do what I'm showing you here, okay? Go get a subscription, get that log analytics workspace spun up, got that, set your retention to something more than 30 days. I'll go a year on this, okay? Great. This will cost you very little. It's well worth your money to do this. We're talking less than $100 a month. We're talking maybe 20 bucks, depending on the size of your org and how much data you've got going here. Okay. So now that you've got that analytics workspace set up, where you're going to go here is in Azure AD, go down to diagnostic settings here, and you're going to add diagnostic settings. Okay. You're going to go through here, and I'm basically just connecting Azure to this. And I'm going to say, I'm going to give this a name. We'll call it Azure AD logging. And I'm going to send my logs to my workspace here. There's my subscription. There's my workspace. If you've got multiple, pick the one you want. And now what am I going to send? Audit logs? Yes, 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 yes. I don't have ADFS. That doesn't apply. Risky users? Absolutely. Yep, yep, yep. I'm sending everything I can to this analytics workspace. Save. And now I'm going to sleep better at night. Okay, because I get my data stored for a year. And I can also get way better insights into what's happening in my tenant to analyze the data. Okay. So what I mean by that is if you go back here to workbooks, this may take a second to wire it up. Nope, here they are. These are built-in workbooks to see activity that's happening in my environment. Like if I want to look at legacy protocols, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, this is a super easy workbook to see what's going on with legacy protocols in my tenant. Okay. All right. So that's log analytics. You need one of these things. Next, we've got app consent permissions, right? Okay. Right. So app consent, another piece of the puzzle. So you know how I was using the Graph Explorer? So let's go look at that on the enterprise apps list here. Okay. You'll see here that I now have this lovely Graph Explorer application. This did not exist until I consented it and added it to the tenant, right? There are bajillions of these apps that you can do SSO integration with, okay? For example, lucidchart.com. If I go out here to lucidchart.com and say, hey, I want to use this service and I want to hit login, and it's like, oh, look, the magic sign in with Office 365 button. As soon as I go through that door, it's going to consent me and I'm going to give it permissions. I'm not going to hit that unless I know what I'm doing and I want to. I'll consent to that. And I just got single sign on for the very first time with my demo tenant to lucidchart.com. Welcome. And what did that do in my environment? Well, that just instantiated a new enterprise app called Lucid. Look at that. And what permissions does it have? Let's take a look. We're waiting for squirrels to run around in Microsoft's world. Don't you love live demos? Okay. We'll refresh this. We'll give this a second. And there we go. And so if I look at the permissions here, I can see that admin consent has not been granted. Which users have said, yes, I'm going to do this? Well, and they gave it this ability, and how many people have done this? One user. Okay, so that's one nice thing. When you check the admin consent box, you stop getting a count of this because it's irrelevant. Users don't need to consent. You did it for them. Okay, so be aware of that little nuance. From a permission standpoint, what you're looking at here is there's delegated permissions and then there's application permissions. Application permissions are way powerful. If you have enterprise apps in your environment that show application permissions, then they have the ability to, the application itself has that ability and it has no bearing on who's using the app, which user. In this case, the app can only do what the user could do with their own profile and sign themselves in and stuff like that. So that's the big difference. App permissions are more powerful, and you need to look at them from a stronger point of view or more stringent point of view. Okay. I'm going to show you a couple of apps that you all need to go look in your tenant right now to see if you have these apps and to check their permissions. Okay. It is going to be, I lost my breadcrumb because I refreshed. Enterprise apps. You want to look for the Graph Explorer. True story. We were on site with a customer and looking at some of their services, and we said, the client says, well, wow, Azure AD is not very secure. I can go look at anything I want through the Graph Explorer. And I says, no, you can't unless someone did something they didn't know what they were doing. And we went out here, and sure enough, they had Graph Explorer in their tenant. And we went over here to permissions, and we had admin consent to holy freak me out. Okay, all kinds of stuff. Like they could read everyone's OneDrive, they could read all the site collections, they could read mailbox data, they could read calendar data, they could write to that kind of stuff. And anyone in the tenant that went to this little tool here and knew what they were doing could do that. Okay, so this is the scary part of enterprise apps in Azure's world. So go check for, what was I telling you? Go check for Graph Explorer. You want to check for Microsoft Graph PowerShell. That's doing the same thing through the Graph API, but from PowerShell. You want to check for Microsoft Intune PowerShell. And the last one is my favorite, which if you, well, I'll just show you here. It's in my slide deck, but I'll just show you. Actually, Jonah, will you pick up the screen share and show that? Show those two slides. This is what I call the mother of consent. Okay, this is an application called the PNP management shell. You need to go look in your tenant to see if you have the PNP management shell. This is what, when I ran a particular script that was exporting data out of my tenant, this is what it asked for permissions to do. Wow. And if someone didn't know and they checked that little admin consent for the tenant, anybody could go get a script that was using this library, the PNP, that's patterns and practice. It's an old SharePoint thing. Well, it's a SharePoint thing. It's not old. It's been around for a long time, but this is a really powerful app, and you better know what's going on. So how do you secure these if you need to? Let me pick up screen share and I'll show you that again real quick. Okay. How do you secure these? The best thing is to go to this thing, and if it's got admin consent, let's take a look at this one. It is. This scares the bejeebies out of me when I see something like this. Okay, so what I'm going to do immediately is I'm going to go to properties, and I'm going to require assignment to be yes on this. And so now you have to be associated to this application, users and groups. Who can use it? I know that one person can do all of these things and not anybody in the tenant. Okay, so that's the quick thing there. All right, let's talk about passwordless and authentication and authentication strengths. Okay, so what this is we're familiar with conditional access policies and MFA and getting a push notification through the Authenticator app. That's a good first start. What Microsoft is trying to do, and I just learned this yesterday, is that on the push notification, they're trying to kill the simple accept or deny. They need what they're saying, a cognitive process that you have to actually think before you hit accept or deny. And so passwordless is a piece in that direction where when you get those push notifications, it doesn't simply say accept or deny. It gives a number on your screen on your Authenticator app, and then on your login screen, you have to read that number and type that into your phone. Okay. So another big thing I'm a proponent of here is go into Azure AD, go to security, and go to your, well, not that, go to your authentication methods. And in here, this tenant doesn't have it turned on. I wanted to show you guys what you would likely see in your tenant. I'm going to go to the Microsoft Authenticator. I'm going to enable this, and I'm going to turn it on for all users. And I'm totally fine to hit save. I would even hit save in prod. This doesn't do anything to affect your users by doing this. It doesn't make them enroll if they're not enrolled. It doesn't change their login experience with MFA. It simply enables them to do this if they choose to opt into it. Okay. Now let's go back to here, And don't forget to hit the configure button here. Okay, inside here, this is another very important thing. Require this number matching for push notifications. I'm a big fan of, instead of letting Microsoft own my destiny, I'm going to own my destiny here. Do I want to show the name of the application when they get this push notification? Absolutely, so they know what they're signing into. And what about showing a little geographic map of where the sign-in event is coming from based on IPv4? Absolutely, let's enable those. You can target this to a specific group to pilot it and roll it out, totally understand. And you can do that here as well, okay? But the general concept of just enabling this across the tenant here, and then if you want to maybe dial this into specific groups, fair enough. But still, even when I do this, nothing's going to affect my end users. What I have to do at this point is open up my Authenticator app on my cell phone, drill into my account, and hit the Enable Phone Sign-In button. That's the trigger that lights this up on the back end to start taking advantage of this passwordless login. Okay, I'm a big fan of passwordless, and also best feature of the year. If you are using iOS and you have the Authenticator app on your iPhone, you can now enable passwordless on as many accounts as you want. I haven't hit the limit yet. I'm at 15, okay? And so I've got a bunch of Microsoft Authenticator apps that I use for different customers, and I don't have to look up a password when I sign into a customer. Yay, I do have all that in a vault, blah, blah, blah. But now I can just go there, plug in my username, it shows a number, I get the push, I type the number, I pass Face ID, I'm logged in with no passwords. It's fantastic. It's almost phishing resistant. Technically, phishing resistant is what I'm going to talk to you now. Authentication strengths. In the past, I'm sorry I'm talking fast, but I got a ton of content to get through. In the past, in Azure AD, if you were MFA'd, you were MFA'd. It didn't matter if it was a phone call and a phone answer, if it was a text message to your phone, if it was a FIDO2 token, if it was Windows Hello for Business, if it was a push notification to your phone, if it was the OTP code that your Authenticator app generates and you plug that in, all of those equaled you passed MFA, you're good to go. Now you can come into authentication strengths, and Microsoft has some built-in ones here. And they say for phishing resistant MFA, you can only do Windows Hello, a FIDO2 security key, or a certificate-based authentication. That's their phishing resistant MFA. That's the highest level of MFA. And so now when I come in here and I look at a conditional access policy, okay, I'll just look at one that's already here. When I look at the grant on this, I can require a specific authentication strength, not just the, yep, you did MFA, doesn't matter how. I can choose this, and then here is the 3 built-in ones, and I want phishing resistant MFA. I can create my own authentication strength and string together, it's got to be this, this, and this. So at JourneyTEAM, we're going to say you have to have this particular type of MFA to access our sensitive applications. And the guy that just says, I don't want the Authenticator app and I'll do text message, great, but you won't get to this app then, because that's not as secure. Love it. Okay, those are authentication strengths there that we have for Azure AD passwords, authentication strengths. Yeah, look at that. Okay, moving right along. A new feature here that I'm really excited about. Microsoft is starting to mature their lifecycle workflows, they call them. This little caveat, this does require Azure AD Premium Plan 2. So if you go into identity governance here, you now have lifecycle workflows. And this is where I can start building workflows. Let's show you this of what's going to happen before I hire that new employee starts their job. Okay. Or if they leave employment. And so I can even do things like send the manager of this employee their temporary access password so they can get onboarded for the first time. There's a new employee hire date property in Active Directory, Azure AD, that's going to say the date this person's supposed to start employment. And then based on that, I can then start building out what the activity is going to be. So if this, here's my scope, like if their department is this, then we're going to run this process. Okay. The tasks of what I'm going to do, make sure their account's enabled, send them a welcome email, add them to some groups. What are the things do I want to do here? Right. Add them to a team, run a custom task extension. This is where it gets really powerful. I can reach over to an Azure function and do whatever I need to when this person joins the company, okay, type thing. So this is a really cool new workflow that is built into the Azure environment, okay? Okay, let's talk about another great little tip that I would recommend you start using in Azure AD, and that is custom security attributes, okay? Oh, shoot. Okay, well, this is what you're gonna see when you go to your tenant. When you go here, you're like, oh, what are custom security attributes? And can I add an attribute set? And holy crap, I'm the global admin. Why is this grayed out for me? Well, I'll explain that. Basically, what attributes, custom security attributes are, think of this as the newest, latest iteration of Azure schema extensions. What's neat, though, is I can apply them to users, groups, or applications. And so to do that, you have to have a very specific role, and it is the, I think it's the directory. Nope. I should have had this off the top of my head. Nope. Attributes right here. Attribute definition administrator. So if I have this role, I can then manage these custom security attributes. Okay. And so I, as a global admin, I can give myself this ability. Okay. And then this will give me the ability to light these guys up. Permanent, that's fine. You could do the same thing through PIM on this. I'm not going to talk about PIM in this session. But that's why that was grayed out for me the first time I went there. Okay. And so the other really, really powerful thing about these is you can scope who can create them and who can see these attributes on a user or application object. Okay, so instead of everyone seeing everything, you can target who can use and interact with these applications. So delegated administration is a story there. It also, if you're interested in delegated administration across different parts of your organization with Azure AD, organizational units is another huge piece of the puzzle there. Okay. Okay, so now let's go back over here and we'll take a refresh here. And we're waiting for squirrels to run around and it's not there yet, but that would light up. Okay. You can build these attribute sets and then start applying them. So when you look at your enterprise applications, I'll pick one here. How about our lovely PNP? There's the ability now to set a custom security attribute on it. Okay, so think about this. On a user or application, I can start defining attributes or metadata around this application. And now when you go to the view here, you can add a filter and you can say that applications, oh, that as soon as these are in the tenant, I'll have the ability to say a custom security attribute on this list here. And then I can pick that and I can see all the applications that have this property on them. Maybe it's a department or a business unit or something that you want to track this applications for these people or something like that. Okay, so that's what those custom security attributes are. Okay, how am I doing time-wise? I got a few minutes. Okay, good. I want to leave time for Q&A at the end. So here is one of the most important things that I want you to pay attention to and listen to. Everyone has been talking about, and we've been saying it for years, Microsoft's been saying it for years, that we are deprecating legacy protocols, okay? And when we say legacy protocols, this is POP, IMAP, SMTP, ActiveSync, et cetera, et cetera. These all apply to typically Exchange Online, okay? And so Microsoft, as of like October 1st, started hitting the hammer to shut these things down and disable them in customers' tenants. But they said, but we're not going to do SMTP because we know there's a bunch of people that still use SMTP for authentication and SMTP relay use cases. So we can't touch that sacred cow. So guess what that means? what I'm seeing now in customers' tenants and our own tenant, right? We're just like you guys, other than we try to keep up on security for the most part. We are seeing all of these password spray and trying to access accounts. They've all moved away from POP and IMAP and those ActiveSync legacy protocols, and they're all just hitting SMTP because Microsoft left that door open. So it's kind of like saying, we have secured the building except the one back door over here, and it's not even a secret there's a back door to your building, and everyone just walks around and walks right into your house. Okay, so what you want to do for this, the good news is tracking this down is pretty easy. And I should have had a more mature demo tenant here. I could show you our JourneyTEAM tenant, but you'll see this in your tenant, so this is not a big deal. Go over to your Azure AD and simply go to sign in logs. Okay.
Sorry, Eric, you're gonna need to share again. I grabbed
Oh,
screen
you took
share
it over.
from you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry.
Appreciate the reminder. Yep. All right. So go to Azure AD and go to your sign in logs. Okay. And if you don't have a log analytics workspace, any one of you can do this today. If you do, there's some other things I'll show you about a log analytics workspace here. So, but go here and you're going to add a filter and you're going to pick the client app, and the client app we want is specifically SMTP. The good news is this door that's still open, SMTP, it's super easy to identify this traffic. That's a whole hour discussion that we'll save you. Reese can talk to you all day about that. So I simply want to know what SMTP authentication events are coming into my environment. And right now I have none, but you'll get a list here and you'll see if they're failing or status, and you're going to see all kinds of IP addresses and locations from bots and bad guys trying to get your password and log in via SMTP. Okay. If you have a production tenant that's been up for more than 4 months, you will see this in your tenant, is what I'll predict. Okay. So therefore, what do? Microsoft, the other thing I'm going to show you on this real quick is if you look in the Azure, the M365 Admin Center, go over here to settings and then look at org settings. Go down to modern, you'll have a whole big old list of org settings here. Go down to modern authentication. And this is where, number one, if this checkbox here is not enabled, immediately turn it on. This allows modern authentication to happen from the Outlook client. Outlook 2013 with a registry key or newer will work with that. So if that's not turned on, then something's wrong and you've got to turn that on ASAP. Okay. Number two, this tenant, this is a brand new demo tenant that has been spun up very recently. These protocols are all still on. These are basic protocols. And so I'm going to start turning these off. If you have a use case for SMTP, that would still be on, right? As soon as I hit save here, what's happening is Microsoft is creating a Exchange Online policy that's blocking these protocols. Okay. And so therefore, that's the default policy that's applied to the entire organization. So if you look like this and you're like, yeah, I left this one turned on because I have those printers that have to relay mail. Well, there's a way to fix this. I'm a fan of, you have to do this through PowerShell, but it's really simple. Contact us if you need help. But you can go into PowerShell, you can create a new policy that just allows SMTP, and then you assign that policy to the printer's account. Done. Once that's in place, you come here and turn this off, because this is the let me get that. That's a weird UI. I don't know what's going on with that Outlook client. But you turn all these off and you end up with this, and then your tenant is now secure from legacy protocols. And you can then go to that specific user and give them a policy that allows SMTP. It works beautifully. Okay. And so when you do that, when you look back at your sign-in logs here and look at this, you will no longer see bad guys trying to log in with SMTP. Okay. And that's a good thing. And the reason why is because You only see sign-in events here in the Azure AD sign-in logs when Exchange gets that legacy protocol login request and it sends it to Azure, or its daddy, if you will, for authentication. And Azure gets it and says, oh, is that good or not? What we're doing here through this policy here is at the Exchange door, we are shutting you down. Therefore, the login requests never even get to the sign-in logs of Azure AD. Okay. And literally, when we turn this on in a customer's tenant, my failed sign-in attempts with bad guys trying to get passwords through legacy protocols immediately stop. Okay, in my Azure AD sign-in logs, it's like magic. And I know, and so now I can have a conditional access policy that says for this printer, you can sign in, but you have to be from this network location. And I've got a really good story there. Okay, for that printer that can't do modern auth. So legacy protocols, yay, Microsoft killed them. Not really. There's still a big hole in your tenant. You've got to look at SMTP. I promise you this is going on in your environment. Okay. So that's pretty much what I had. So let's take it back. Joni, you want to take our screen share back? We'll go to our Q&A slide. And what questions does anyone have? I know Reese and Jonah have been watching the chat, so that's wonderful. But if anyone wants to come off mute and bring up some questions or anything you want to talk about, that would be wonderful. And thank you, John, for posting the survey. I'd love to hear your feedback there. And time is yours.
Rolf, it looks like Connor asked where the setting is for modern auth.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so go to admin.microsoft.com. You're going to expand out. Here, let me share my screen and I'll show you. Okay. Okay. So, sure, I'll close this dialog. So, admin.microsoft.com. Make sure you hit show all. Okay. If you're not seeing all this stuff here, there's a little show all button. And then you're going to go underneath settings and org settings. Okay. And then you're going to go down to modern authentication. There's a bunch of settings in here: settings, org settings, modern authentication. And then in here's where you'll see these settings here. Okay. Turn modern auth on. Definitely do that. And then this is where you can shut down those legacy protocols. Once again, if nothing's using SMTP, well, how do I know if it's using SMTP? You're going to see it right here, guaranteed. Okay, so if you go to this list and you're like, nothing's using SMTP, no brainer. You're going to flip back over and simply disable SMTP here, hit save, and you're done. But if you go to your tenant and you go to here in this filter, oh, make sure you go the last month as well. Okay, don't forget that. Last month of logs here. Once again, you only get a month's worth of data here. So if you need more than that, guess where we're going to go? Log analytics here. Okay. And from here, I can get much more than that. The easiest, you have to know KQL, which is not hard, but there's some searches you can do here to find SMTP. But go to your workbook here and let's look at legacy protocols here. And if you're showing anything up here, right, I can go, this is 30 days here, but I could, when I run this, I can edit this report here and see the actual, let's actually show you that. So this is the query that it ran to show me legacy protocols, and you can modify this here. So this age in 30 days, hey, my log analytics is storing data for a year. Oh, well, it's okay, let's do 200 days here. Okay, and then you could run that query and you would get data for 200 days old. Okay.
A quick call out here, Eric, since you're in here. So log analytics subscription, and then you're able to filter this data.
Yep.
It's an interesting way Microsoft does this. It's similar to other things that Microsoft does where you're looking for things that aren't very intuitive. So line 7, where it says case status error code equals 0, success failure. It's kind of an interesting thing of what you're looking for. Is that you're looking for successes. So a good username and password using a non-modern authentication client. So on line 9, it says client app used is not a modern auth. You know, it's not browser, it's not mobile apps and desktop clients. So it's a little bit of a, like you have to flip what you're looking for. You're looking for the things that are not modern auth that are successes. And that
Exactly.
will show you what is your gap that you're trying to close.
Yeah, so Jason, you're looking for successes. Yeah, so back here on the sign-in logs here, you were looking for successful authentications on SMTP. Okay, because you know those are valid credentials that got through. Okay, so when you look at that client app, and you're going to look for SMTP, so that's another quick little filter. Just add another filter here for status of success. These are your, let's go a month here. If you wanted this same thing, Reese could probably do this in his sleep, show you how to do this through KQL to show successful SMTP sign-ins for the last whatever length you've had your log analytics workspace, right? But this is where you are legitimately using SMTP. If you see locations here that scare you, you are compromised right now. Okay. And so if you see legitimate sign-ins here, like printers and things like that, you can create a CA policy to scope exactly where that sign-in comes from. Because once again, bad guy gets a printer's SMTP, they're going to relay mail. So you would go over here to security, Jason, to answer that. And you're going to go to conditional access, and you're going to go to named locations, and you're going to build an IP range that represents your named location. My office location. I'll mark that as trusted, sure. And that's going to be 216.49.121.45/32. Whatever your public IP is, the public IP. Another tip, I've seen people put private IPs here. It does nothing. You have to put the public IP address as it leaves your network. Okay. Great. I've got a named location defined and it's trusted. So now I'm going to go back over to my conditional access policy here. And when I go build a policy, this would be block legacy SMTP auth except from trusted location. And I'm going to target all users. Okay. And I'm going to take any cloud app, and the condition is location is going to be any location except my office location. And this is going to be a block. Okay. And I know what I'm doing, so I won't exclude myself. Create, you can leave it in reports only mode, or you've now just blocked SMTP login from every place on the planet except that IP address from your tenant. Okay.
And Microsoft and everyone else is waiting for printer manufacturers to update their connections to allow for modern authentication or application based instead of legacy SMTP. It's around the corner. We've already set it up with a few services and changed to a modern authentication and then locked down SMTP completely in organizations successfully.
Yep. Okay, we are up on time. John's probably trying to jump in here saying, "Shut up, Eric."
You're good.
But
you're good. Our good friend Gordon Bjorman had a question. We can maybe tackle that offline.
Yeah, the short answer is universal print. That's correct. You don't need SMTP with universal print, but that's not scan to email. So a little different use case. Good question though. Different use case. So yeah, the joy of printers. Cool. Thank you all for attending. Please fill out the survey. That'd help us out. We just try to be better and provide good value to you guys, and reach out if you have any questions or if we can help you. We love doing this stuff. So thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.